Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode of Movie NP Halloween Edition, the vlog where we review movies and analyze them for life hacks and self help tips. This Saturday, October 5th, 2024, kicks off Svengooli's annual Bonanza on MeTV. The day will start at 7 a.m. by featuring Halloween inspired cartoons. Then from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. will be a whole slew of Halloween inspired classic westerns such as Wild Wild West and Gunsmoke. And at 8/7 Central, Svengoolie will feature the classic 1939 Son of Frankenstein. But tonight, I will not be reviewing Son of Frankenstein. What I will be reviewing is the parody of this film, Young Frankenstein. Dun dun dun! Young Frankenstein was released in 1974, is directed by Mel Brooks, and was written by Gene Wilder, Mel Brooks, and I love that they gave Mary Shelley credit here. It stars Gene Wilder, Terry Garr, Madeline Kahn, Marty Feldman, and Peter Boyle as the creature. The film is 1 hour 46 minutes long, rated PG, and carries an IMDb rating of 8 out of 10. Apparently, folks, there's some kind of conspiracy out there because it is not currently available on any streaming service that I could find. It's available only on DVD and Blu ray from Amazon.com. The film is one of my all time favorites. I think I saw this when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I was not only fascinated by the story, but I also enjoyed the humor even then. I actually did not know the film was largely based on Son of Frankenstein until I saw that film on DVD about 15 years ago. At that time, Universal had released a tin can box set of all the Universal monster movies, and Son of Frankenstein was included in that set. In fact, the parted pencil mustache that Frederick Frankenstein wears in Young Frankenstein is the same that Frankenstein's son sports in Son of Frankenstein. In Gene Wilder's DVD interview, he says the film is based on Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, and The Ghost of Frankenstein. The styling of the film also matches that of the 1930s and the 40s. So here is the plot synopsis. So, spoiler alert. Young Frankenstein starts out as we meet Victor Frankenstein's grandson, Frederick Frankenstein, or should I say Frankenstein. He is a lecturing physician at an American medical school who specializes in neurology. He appears verbally and physically angered when anyone brings up his grandfather's work. In fact, he uses the more Americanized Frankenstein to distance himself as much as possible from his family name. He even replies that the stories of his grandfather's work are fairy tales that never happened. The film takes no time into jumping into the primary plot. Frederick is met by a solicitor who tells him that his grandfather has left his castle and family estate to him. Frederick then travels to Frankenstein's castle in Transylvania to settle the estate. He is met by Igor, the grandson of Victor's original lab assistant. While there, he becomes more and more interested in his grandfather's work, particularly after finding his grandfather's private journal titled How I Did It. Soon after, Frederick devises a plan to repeat his grandfather's work, but of course, this time he thinks he's not going to be making any mistakes that his grandfather did. Frederick hopes to do so by ensuring that this monster has a genius's brain. But when Igor is sent to retrieve the intended genius's brain, he accidentally drops it and subs it with one named Abby Normal. Fearing that this will anger Frederick, Igor does not tell him of these events. So, unbeknownst to Frederick, he places an abnormal brain in this 8-foot tall behemoth. Promptly upon reanimation, the monster goes berserk, attacks Frederick, is given a sedative in one of the more hilarious scenes in the film, but ultimately, with a little help from Victor Frankenstein's lover, escapes the castle and rampages across the countryside. But in the process, we discover that the music soothes the savage beast. In the meantime, the townspeople gather to discuss their unease at Frederick's arrival to town and fear that he is continuing his grandfather's work. Inspector Kemp, a one-eyed police inspector with a prosthetic arm, whose German accent is so thick that not even his own countrymen can understand him, proposes to visit the doctor, whereupon he demands assurance that Frankenstein will not create another monster. Of course, Frankenstein tells him, I certainly will not. But while the monster is on his rampage, he has a couple hilarious misadventures reminiscent of the events in the original Frankenstein film, including meeting and playing with a little girl and being invited for dinner as a guest by a blind hermit that believes that the monster visit is an answer to his prayers. With the use of music, Frederick and Igor successfully lure the monster back to the castle and lock him up. Frederick asks to be locked in the cell with the creature to attempt to reason with him, which results in another incredible funny scene. It's around this time that Frederick gets the idea that he can rehabilitate the creature and has a change of heart and demands he now be called Frankenstein. This results in a comical tap shoe dance number to Putting on the Ritz, where Frederick attempts to demonstrate his creation to his peers and to the world. This ends in disaster and the monster rampages again. The police quickly act and capture the creature and place him in prison, but after being teased by one of the guards with a match, the creature breaks free of his chains and escapes the prison. The creature again rampages across the countryside and at this time kidnaps Frederick's fiancée. But this works out for the best, and her and the creature fall in love. And yet again, he is lured back to the castle using the violin. By this time, fearful of the death and damage his grandfather's monster left in its path, the townspeople form a mob to storm Frankenstein's castle to seek revenge and take matters into their own hands. Frederick decides that the only way to save the monster at this point is to cross-transfuse cerebral fluid between he and the monster to correct the monster's chemical imbalance. Both of their lives hang in the balance, but just as the town mob breaks through the door to drag them away, the monster awakens and directs the town people to put Frankenstein back down. The film ends with a happy ending where both monster and creator have settled down with the love of their lives, and we find that through the transfusion, they have also bestowed upon each other an incredible gift. I'll let you discover what that gifts are. So here are some interesting trivia surrounding the film. While filming Blazing Saddles, Gene Wilder was working on the script. Mel Brooks happened to notice that Wilder was working on something and asked him about it. Wilder told him that he was working on a piece that involved Frankenstein's grandson, who was ashamed of his family name and heritage. This resulted in the collaboration that became the film we know and love today. Columbia tried to pull a fast one on Brooks. It wanted to capture the look and feel of the early Universal monster movies of the 1930s. Wilder and Brooks insisted on filming on black and white stock. They even used fades, transitions, and opening closing credits popular at that time. However, Columbia wanted to shoot it in color and promised that the color would be removed in post-production. But Brooks knew that the executives would screw him and go back on their word, so he took the project over to 20th Century Fox, who agreed not only to Brooks' terms of filming it on black and white, but even increased the budget. Brooks even insisted on a period score and had his longtime collaborator John Morris compose the score. Perhaps the most memorable was the Transylvania Lullaby, the haunting violin piece used in the title theme and throughout the film. Steven Tyler has stated that Igor's line "Walk This Way" inspired Aerosmith's hit song of the same name. Marty Feldman improvised Igor's hump, swapping positions. No one realized this until well into the film, and Wilder and Brooks loved it so much it made the final cut. Brooks got into an argument with Wilder over the Putting on the Ritz tap dance routine. Brooks just thought it was too silly and would lose the audience. Brooks ended up stomping out in a rage. However, he immediately called Wilder back and asked if he saw that madman who left his house. Wilder took this as an apology, and Brooks agreed to let the scene end, stating that he knew that it was right because Wilder fought for it so hard. The lab equipment seen in the film is the same equipment used in the original 1931 Frankenstein. When Brooks learned that the original equipment was made by Kenneth Strickfaden and that he was still alive, he sought him out as a consultant to Young Frankenstein. What Brooks didn't know was that all the original lab equipment was sitting in Strickfaden's garage. There's a fascinating book about Strickfaden titled Dr. Frankenstein's Electrician. I highly recommend checking it out. It's very interesting. The American Film Institute ranks Our Young Frankenstein as the 13th best comedy movie of all time and is on their list of the 100 best comedies ever. So let's get into the life hacks and self-help tips. But before we get started, I have to give my usual disclaimer. What I'm about to discuss is for general purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose or treat anyone's condition. Speak to your healthcare provider. Only you and your healthcare provider can determine the best course of action for you. There are quite a few quirky, humorous self-help tips we can extract from the film's characters and situations. 1. Embrace your heritage, but make it your own. Frederick Frankenstein initially denies his family's heritage, but ultimately accepts it and puts his own spin on it. Tip here is don't be afraid to acknowledge your past, but remember that you are in control of your future. Build on what came before, but make it uniquely yours. As Doc Brown says, your future hasn't been written yet, no one's has. Your future is whatever you make it, so make it a good one. Experimentation leads to growth. Dr. Frankenstein conducts risky, creative experiments like bringing a creature to life. Tip here is life is about risks and experimenting with new ideas. We don't grow unless there's risk involved. Even if you make mistakes, you'll learn and grow from them. Which leads into number 3, persistence pays off. Frederick Frankenstein doesn't give up even when his creature doesn't behave as expected. Tip here is even when things don't go your way, persistence and problem solving will eventually help you achieve your goals. I go into this a little bit more detail in my Alien Romulus review. I'll leave that link for that below. But in short, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Winston Churchill, Walt Disney, Colonel Sanders, they all had failed businesses. They've all went bankrupt at least once, but they none of them made success until they were older in life. So don't give up. The one I want to focus on today that I did not discuss back in Alien Romulus was Milton Hershey. Milton Hershey was born poor. He apprenticed in a confectioner's shop, and he had multiple failed businesses. In 1890, he formed his first successful business, the Lancaster Caramel Company, that ended up employing over 1,300 workers, and he had 2 factories at one time. But upon traveling to Chicago for the World's Fair, Hershey became interested in chocolate. He sold the Lancaster Caramel Company for $1 million and started the Hershey Chocolate Company. $1 million back in 1890. I'm not going to do the math here, but that's an incredible number in today's money. In 1900, he used the proceeds to start the Hershey Chocolate Company. He got into his head that he wanted to make milk chocolate with fresh milk. This was in part a marketing angle, but also because at that time dairy farms were everywhere near his birthplace in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and fresh milk was cheap. So he purchased acres of farmland near Lancaster and built his first chocolate factory. The Swiss were the first to perfect milk chocolate, but they used powder milk. Either Hershey didn't know this or he didn't care, so he wanted to use fresh milk. He experimented day and night for years, even hiring a chemist from an Ivy League school who failed and said it couldn't be done. This is when Hershey turned to an old friend who had no background in chemistry but years of experience in candy making. The friend perfected the recipe, but in the process, the milk soured. This is what gives Hershey chocolate its unique, sharp flavor similar to that of yogurt, while European chocolate, like Nestle's or Cadbury, is smoother and sweeter. The factory was in the center of dairy farmland, but with Hershey support, houses, businesses, churches, hospitals, and a whole transportation infrastructure was built around the factory. The area around the factory eventually became known as Hershey, Pennsylvania. This guy was a true philanthropist, and it would benefit everyone if the billionaires of today would take some lessons from Hershey's playbook here. He funded schools, hospitals, refused to lay off workers during the Great Depression, and was one of the first to provide free health care to his employees. Case in point, the Hershey School in the year 2000-2001 school year spent $111 million for food, clothing, and education for its 1,150 low-income students. All of this because Hershey was persistent and did not give up. Laugh at yourself. The film is filled with moments of absurdity, from Igor's shifting hump to over the top dramatics. Tip here is don't take life too seriously, find humor in your mistakes, and quirks make challenges more bearable. This leads into number five, which is embrace the absurdity. The entire movie thrives on absurd humor, yet it's endearing because of it. The tip here is life can't get strange and ridiculous sometimes. Embrace this absurdity, and you'll find joy in the unexpected. So it takes courage to be yourself and grow into your own skin, particularly in professional setting or in business. But I found that when I learned to let myself be myself and not be afraid to be quirky and absurd, this is when things really started to happen for me. See, kids, thankfully, largely to my Uncle Bill, I grew up watching the Three Stooges, old Looney Tunes cartoons, and about this time is when VHS became popular. And my Uncle Bill would bring home classics such as The Absurd Airplane, Police Academy, and yes, Young Frankenstein. I learned that humor is a very powerful coping mechanism. But as I entered professional life, I suppressed that side of my personality for many years because I wanted to be seen and taken as a serious professional. But that ended up as a dead end for me. It wasn't until I embraced the absurdity that I really grew into my own. Nowadays, I damn near intentionally go out of my way to be absurd. Um, Case in point, we just had a leadership meeting the other day where we were discussing a policy surrounding whether or not we were going to allow couples into our detox or residential program. It started to get real tense in the meeting with stories going back and forth of all the drama that has occurred over the years. And this group feeling that we should allow couples in, another group thinking that we shouldn't. So, so I couldn't resist myself. I pulled up the theme song from Young and the Restless on my phone and began to play it, telling the group I was setting the mood. After a good laugh that everybody had, it's relieved the tension in the room, and we quickly settled on a solution and moved on. In short, embrace the absurdity and use it as a tool. I think this normalizes things for people because deep down inside, I think most of us fear that we're some kind of freak. This allows others to know it's okay to be different and it's okay to be yourself. And the positivity you create by embracing the absurdity will benefit everyone. Surround yourself with quirky support. Dr. Frankenstein surrounds himself with characters like Igor and his assistant Inga, who offer both comic relief and unexpected wisdom. Tip: the people you choose to have in your life don't have to be perfect, but they should support you in ways that matter, sometimes even through laughter and lightness. There's also a theory here, folks, that you become the average of the people that you hang out with. So maybe that's just, makes common sense, but common sense isn't common anymore. So if you hang out in a crack house, your future probably isn't going to be so bright. You hang out with a bunch of millionaires and successful folks, the chances are that life is going to be a little better for you. Number seven, don't be afraid of what you don't understand. Frederick is initially terrified of the idea of creating life, but he overcomes his fear and eventually embraces the unknown. Tip here is fear often comes from not understanding something. Take the time to learn about what scares you, and you'll often find that it's not so frightening after all. Soapbox alert. I love this quote by Mark Twain. He says, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth's all one's lifetime. So I've done a little travel in my life. I was briefly a medical officer on a cruise ship. I was a bartender on another cruise ship. I've been sailed the Caribbean. I've sailed the Pacific Northwest. I've sailed Alaska. I've traveled in Europe. I've even been to Russia and back. What I discovered was no matter where you go, no matter what color your skin is, what nationality you are, people all have the same hopes, dreams, and desire. Everyone wants to simply be left alone, to live and seek happiness. Borders are imaginary drawn lines drawn by politicians, and people to profit them in some way or another. Do not fall into the us versus them trap that they try to feed you. They are the ultimate magicians that create illusion to distract you while they get away with robbing everyone's freedoms and bank accounts. 8. Channel your energy wisely. The creature's energy is misdirected at first, leading to chaos, but Frederick manages to help him harness it positively. Tip here is channel your emotions and energy into productive activities. You have the power to turn negative experiences into something beneficial. But we only have so much energy. So let's talk more about energy. In the film, we use energy and electricity, or galvanism is what it was called back in the 1800s, to bring the creature to life. In other films, the ante was upped to say that this was cosmic rays. Whatever it is, we know that although we don't quite understand it, there is some life force that keeps living matter going. Now, Western medicine will tell you that it's all about metabolism and making electricity through calcium, magnesium, and potassium ion channels. And this is all true. But Chinese medicine talks about qi, spelled CHI. The Chinese believe that qi is our life force, and they relate many disease states to an imbalance in qi. So, how can we improve or increase our qi? Well, there's several methods. The most basic is getting proper sleep, proper nutrition, water, exercise, avoiding or minimizing alcohol, illicit drugs, recreational drugs, and excessive sugars. Others include spending time in nature, meditation, breathing techniques. I've already talked in other videos about my 4-6 breathing technique that I use during hypnosis. In Chinese medicine, they talk about breathing in a square. This is simply just equalizing the time it takes for you to breathe in, hold it, breathe out, and hold it again. So, for example, I take a breath by the count of 5. I hold it for the count of 5. I breathe it out for the count of 5. I hold it again for the count of 5. And then I breathe back in for the count of 5. So again, we have an equal time frame there, which creates a square. Practice of feng shui, or decluttering your home and office. There's some data out there that the clutter just creates negativity that just sucks our energy away. And of course, acupuncture, tai chi, and qigong are other methods to increase your qi. A word on acupuncture, interestingly enough, it is one of the only complementary medicines that have been shown to be superior to drugs and medication in the treatment of lower back pain. Number 9, fight for what's important to you. Perhaps the most important scene, the tap dance scene, would have never made it to the final cut if Wilder hadn't fought for it. And 10, don't be afraid to abandon one avenue and seek a new direction. If Brooks hadn't pulled out from the deal with Columbia, more than likely the film would not have been the success that it became. If you take anything from Young Frankenstein, it's the humor, resilience, and embracing the strange, absurd parts of life can get you through most anything. Well, that's it for today, folks. Please click like and subscribe and share with a friend. Comment below your thoughts. Let me know what you're struggling with and if there's a film that you would like me to review. Join me next week. Pleasant nightmares. I hope the bed bugs bite, and be well. Oh, and Gwengoli, I'm still waiting for that call. Good night.